You are about to journey against the current of contemporary thought and beyond the troubled waters of daily news to the very source of our extraordinary culture. You are going upstream with Cashill and Edge.
Hey, folks, welcome back to Upstream with Cashill and Edge. Jack Cashill here.
Jack, Loy Edge here.
And now, why do we call our show Upstream? We haven't talked about this in a while.
We both knew Andrew Breitbart and his famous quote that I always get wrong, so I'm not even going to repeat it. I'm going to let you do that.
I think it was all politics is downstream from culture.
Yeah, and since we don't want to talk about politics.
Nah, that's for the plebeians. Anyone can talk about that.
Does
Leave that to Sean Hannity.
The back and the forth, the Sturm and Drang and blah, blah, blah. No, we want to find out what's behind all this stuff.
Right.
Upstream. In the culture.
And so let me ask you a question then. Let's go upstream. Did you watch the halftime of the Super Bowl? Did you watch the Super Bowl?
No.
You know, we live in Kansas City, by the way, so it's almost mandatory here in the cult of the Chiefs, to...
I played golf.
You
want to find a day to play golf? Go to the city of the home or the Super Bowl contestant and play golf.
You have all the courses in town.
Had it all to myself.
And especially in a small market town like Kansas City, where it is so much the civic religion. Mm-hmm. It really is. And yet, I must give
today's the parade.
Yeah, that was last week. That was last week. Remember, Loy?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, that was last week.
Yeah, I was drunk.
I was at a restaurant. I just went for lunch on the day of the parade, and I walk in, and I'm thinking usually there's like 8, 10 people there. It was full with people in regalia.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
And because the parade was on all the big screen TVs, all of them were fixed on the parade and the ceremony.
So the people at the parade were watching the parade on TV?
No, the people in the restaurant were watching, right.
Okay, so it wasn't part of it.
I mean, there was almost no conversation.
Oh.
So when they have a Star-Spangled Banner, everyone stops, and we have the, for the, put their hands over their harness in the restaurant, right? And then they all get into it, and this is the one redeeming feature about this cult, the cult of the Chiefs, is our anthem and our hand gestures. Whoa!
Chiefs and Chopper, Chiefs and Chopper.
And despite all the hectoring by the civic worthies, to abandon the all the Indian sort of indigenous people, Native American lore, we continue at it.
And for the benefit of the people watching who are not from Kansas City, our anthem. From the land of the free and the home of the
Chiefs. Right, so
that's what they do.
Right, that's our cult. I mean, as far as cults go, it's pretty benign. What doesn't happen in Kansas City when they win the Super Bowl is that they don't tear the city down.
No.
They behave much more nicely.
Hang on, man. It's coming.
Yeah, right. And this is the second time in 4 years. The excitement level is a little less, but, the expectations are higher, so which is good. But the halftime show, here's what happens. I would never have watched a halftime show. I was watching a game. I root for the Chiefs. I don't lose sleep if they lose, but I root for them. And so since my wife made dinner and she wanted to watch the halftime show and she served dinner at halftime, I had to watch the halftime show, which is this enormous pageant of enormous spectacle. And the star of this year's halftime show was a woman named Rihanna.
Oh, my favorite.
And who is, I did not know this, is not American. She's from Barbados. And she is, in Africa, Afro-Caribbean or whatever. And it was a bizarre thing. She was 5 months pregnant. And since the field was a mess to begin with, and I guess they wanted to keep the yeah, you weren't around 6 months ago, were you? She came down as big glass platforms or some sort of platforms of see-through, and she was surrounded by hundreds. She was dressed totally head to foot in red, When you get back to
How daring! How unusual for a halftime show that promotes Satanism.
I don't know if that was the actual
No, of course
projection.
not.
But she's surrounded by like 100 guys who are dressed as like abominable snowmen. Like head to foot in his big furry outfits. They look like hostess snowballs or something.
Wow.
Eskimos. And they're all, gyrating and twerking and doing all these things and making obscene gestures every now and then, as is she, as is befitting a woman who's 5 months pregnant. And yet on the right, oddly, the punditry was relatively positive about this, partly because there were no wardrobe malfunctions, as famously happened during the one with Janet Jackson, which gave us the phrase wardrobe malfunctions, a phrase that did not exist prior to that. But it got me to thinking about the state of popular culture and popular music especially. And how did we get here? She sang 2 songs. I couldn't understand the word. I had to look them up. They had a deaf interpreter who was better than Rihanna was. She was really pretty cool. And I could almost understand the deaf interpreter better than I could understand.
So they didn't have the crawl underneath?
No. Plus, she did it purposefully in a Jamaican patois, which made it even harder to understand. But lyrics, in a sense, rap music sort of revived the art of lyricism to a certain degree. It's been a long way.
Conan Van Hughes and those guys.
Right. It's a long way from May to November. And we're in, I think, the November of our cultural years now. And the question is, let's go back to the source. Let's go back to May. How did we get here? Now, you're a music, but you sing, obviously. Sing better than I do.
Man.
I got turned down by my choir as a kid. That's how bad I was. Still am.
Well, there's still hope.
Well, no, it does not. If music had been the way we gauged intelligence, I'd have been a special ed kid from get-go. Just really total special ed. However, that said,
let's do a show on music.
I have excellent taste when it comes to music. But so does everyone think they have. Each person thinks he or she has excellent taste, or they, in the case of, say, Sam Smith, who's the they, them now, apparently. But so it got me to thinking about the evolution in American music and how we came from here to there. And again, we go back to the early 60s when everything kind of broke. Actually, the 50s and in the mid-50s really started. But maybe it was progressing in that direction all along. There's always been sort of evolutionary byways that come, sometimes don't get very far.
Well, that era, that original kind of in-your-face co-opting of the Negro music and the rhythm and blues with the white artists doing that, covering it, and the emergence of rock and roll, Chuck Berry, Elvis, all that.
Right.
Bill Haley, mid-1950s.
Right, mid-1950s, that's right. And did you see the movie Elvis by any chance? The recent one, the Baz Luhrmann one?
No.
It's actually kind of interesting. The guy who plays Elvis is great. He's excellent. But they make the illusion, and they show this in the movie, they show Big Mama Thornton singing Hound Dog. You ain't nothing but a hound dog. And then we show Elvis singing that. And they make the point that he's co-opting black music, overlooking the fact that Hound Dog was written by Lieber and Stoller. 2/3 of the American songbook was written by guys like Lieber and Stoller.
Exactly.
Back in New York City. These 2 Jewish guys writing Hound Dog, which was co-opted by Big Mama Thornton and turned into a black bluesy thing, and then further co-opted, if those are the words, by Elvis and turned into something slightly more mainstream. But that's what the history of American music is.
Right. It's
a mixture of cultures, using their best. I don't think they had alto saxes back in Africa. I'm sorry, Charlie Parker fans.
Yeah.
There is a fusion of various cultures coming together, which is seemingly, I think, a good thing.
And it's always happened. It happens automatically.
Right. It's organic. And
you listen to ranchero music on the Mexican radio station.
Yeah.
That came from the squeeze box players from Germany.
Right. It's the polka music, right? It is.
And it's polka music.
Yeah.
But they politicized it. They racialized it back then in the mid-50s and early 60s
Yeah.
for the same reason that we're talking about all the other stuff they were doing.
Right.
They had to attack that and racialize it and make it an evil, mean, nasty. They're stealing that music from the poor sharecropper, whatever.
And, and then I want to just get back to Lieber and Stoller for a second, because they've written half the rock and roll songs ever written.
Okay.
They're really pretty brilliant guys. And they had a wide range. And they wrote, which strikes me as the song that I find fascinating. I have to listen to every time I hear it. But it may be the most nihilistic song ever released and ever become popular.
One is the loneliest number.
Now, how about Is That All There Is?
Oh, yeah.
Sung by one of my favorite songstresses, Peggy Lee, who sings it so convincingly.
She was so sassy.
Honest to God. And Is That All There Is, my friend?
Yes.
Then Let's Keep on Dancing. It sounds so Weimarish,
It is. It is.
And then it concludes, I have to try to remember, she goes to the circus and is that all there is? The house burns down. Is that all there is? She falls in love. Is that all there is? Then let's keep on dancing because it's nothing, right? And then she's on her deathbed. Is that the way it ends?
I don't remember how it ends.
But it ends really darkly.
Reduced to tears.
And then she dies because is that all there is? So there's not even any heaven. There's no hope. It's such a fascinating song because so few songs are fascinating. I have no idea. I know that I had to look up the names of the Rihanna songs. One is called Umbrella and one is called Work. And the lyrics are they're like Dick and Jane of lyrics, compared to what guys like Lieber and Stoller were doing, or even, Jimmy Kahn and Sammy Kahn, I guess Van Heusen, Jimmy Van Heusen, or Cole Porter, or Hoagie Carmichael, or the Gershwins, or where they paid, or Rodgers and Hart, the guys who paid a ton of attention to lyrics
and those internal rhymes and sophisticated turns of phrase,
and there's a storytelling going on that. They're sometimes revived in popular music. I mean, it's not a lost art. Country western is good and strong at storytelling.
A lot of ballads.
Yeah, and lyrics that are that you can hear, that you can listen to, and that you could equate to, that you could feel like you're part of. So, is there
a lot of double entendres that?
Oh yeah, right.
That deal with beer and dogs.
Right. Yeah. Right. I got friends in low places. So how about yourself? Do you have any, is there any musical form during this period that you found particularly compelling? Or artist?
Oh, a lot of artists. I have never been a mainstream music. I never bought albums or 8 tracks or cassettes. I missed every era of all that stuff. But I've always liked the little offbeat, darker stuff. I'm a big Tom Waits fan.
Yeah.
I love Tom Waits. He paints a great dark picture. He sings love songs to things like a Muriel, a cheap cigar.
Yeah.
I mean, the stuff is hilarious. It's a lot of, it doesn't have a political bent. It has a Bukowski-esque darkness to it.
Right.
He makes fun of culture with his stuff. It just comes from a great place. I love that kind of stuff. I loved the old country swing and the people that brought it back, like Commander Cody and the Lost Planet Airmen, things like that. So I'm terrible, but I'm talking about people nobody's heard of.
Yeah, I know. I've heard of them. Yeah, although I could not hum a song from either one of them.
Well, I can sing their songs.
Give me a riff from Tom Waits.
Tom Waits? Well,
is he the guy who said, I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy?
He has said that.
That's a good line. If whoever said it, I thought it was Tom Waits. I may be wrong.
I got so many Tom Waits songs on the tip of my tongue. I mainly remember lines.
Yeah.
Like he has some great rhymes. He's a lawyer. He's not the one for you. That's one of the great rhymes that Waits.
For you.
He's just trying to talk this chick out of dating this lawyer, and he's a loser. But
Yeah.
he's cooler than the lawyer.
Right, right. And I have. I'm also of the opinion that the emergence of the singer-songwriter, with a few notable exceptions, was a bad day in the history of the evolution of American music.
Is that right? You think that ought to be a specialized thing? Huh?
Yes. I mean, not necessarily. I mean, we can name the exceptions. But that's the problem. We can name the exceptions.
Yeah.
But imagine Frank Sinatra writing his own songs, right? I mean, you can imagine where that goes. But he had I would say, nearly an uncanny ability to find songs that were suited for him.
Oh yeah, I don't know how that process worked. He had a lot of collaborations.
Right, and he's always gracious in in honoring his collaborators. Whenever in his live concerts, he'd always say, this is the great, Jimmy Van Heusen or whatever, Nelson Riddle or whoever was responsible for arranging it, and always gives him credit. And then he would sing songs that he didn't, A, write himself, and B, that many of them did not sing originally, but he sang them so distinctively they became, in our minds, Frank Sinatra songs.
Well, yeah, and I really think more toward the performer when I talk about what kind of music do you like? I would say Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
And, more than just a casual enjoyment of Sinatra. Hell, I know half of the lyrics.
Yeah.
And so Louis Armstrong, Ella, all those great vocalists who brought such a distinctive style. I love all that stuff. So it's really hard for me to go into the music of my era,
right.
The rock, after Steppenwolf and things. I stopped being very interested when I had to stop putting matchbooks underneath the 8-track. When it went to the cassette era, I think I was done.
Well, I'm not sure even. I've bought almost no music in my entire life. I mean, I don't profess to be.
I think I had a Captain Beefheart, a Commander Cody, and a Dan Hicks and his Hot Licks 8-track. But that's about all I ever bought.
Well, the first record I can recall buying was Dee Dee Dinah by Frankie Avalon.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I was a kid.
I didn't even know that one.
No, it's before your time. I mean, this is the Dick Clark era, when Dick Clark was the reigning guru of music in the United States, But I'm also of the opinion that before I get back to the singer-songwriter, I want to explore that a little more, that a rock and roll, or the equivalent of rock and roll of a given era, whether it's rap or whatever, is best left behind when you leave that generation. So, I remember going, for instance, it was on the occasion of, it was in the early 1980s, and it was my birthday. And, we were going to a Rolling Stones concert because Mick Jagger was about to turn 40, and we said, we'll never get to see him again, right? Well, 40 years later, he's an 80-year-old rock and roller, and people say, oh, he's really good for an 80-year-old, but he shouldn't be doing this, You should find something more age-appropriate to be doing, And it seems to me that the songs, and for me, these are 60s songs mostly, 50s even, that resonate with me are the songs when I was going through my own adolescence, and you were having these adventures, and you were in various places you'd never been before, doing things you hadn't done,
right.
Changing schools, changing locations. I was in a different place every summer, all throughout the 60s. So I remember every song where I was. But then when the 70s come and you become an adult, or 80s, 90s, that's not your music anymore. The real appropriation is when adults try to appropriate that music. And then they find it off-putting or appalling or whatever. Well, of course it is, because it's not yours. It seems stupid because you don't remember how stupid your music was when you were that age, right? So songs like Dee Dee Dinah, which when I was an 8-year-old seemed like the greatest song in the world. Now when I hear it, as I occasionally do, I do listen to the 50 station. Seems ridiculous. It was ridiculous, but it was our ridiculous. And that is...
But we didn't have a lot of the good stuff they've got these days, like Satanic Influence and kind of death metal.
No, right? How do we get along without that?
I don't know. I mean, what did we do for halftime shows?
Right.
If we didn't have gals with horns and pitchforks and a bunch of people dancing around looking like COVID viruses or viri or whatever it is. With pitchforks and...
Well, apparently at the Grammys, and oddly, I just happened to catch it in real time. I don't know. Sometimes you catch things like this. Sam Smith.
Which I saw later on different social media. I wasn't watching the Grammys.
I was going to say, I'm going to talk about Sam Smith the way Wikipedia talks about Sam Smith. They performed on the Grammys, and they looked dressed like a devil. And they had various cages and S&M stuff, and they were dressed in red, and they were half, they had their sort of fake man boobs hanging out, and they liked what they were doing because now Sam Smith is a they, and then Wikipedia writes about Sam Smith as they. And it's so confusing because you think, oh, you're talking about the group of people or the individual. It is so indicative of the
circular reasoning of all leftists.
Right. It ends up with confusion and chaos.
Which ultimately it goes full circle, and it just collapses on itself.
Right, but Sam Smith, and here's what happens, is that when anyone dare protest, is the most latest incursion into sanity or into insanity, then you become like the ministers back in Elvis's day. We said this is the devil's music, right?
That's right.
They may have been right, but then you become that person, so people shy from even pointing this out.
That's right.
Their fear of being labeled the old fuddy-duddy, the old fogey who just doesn't get it, right?
And it's the same formula as the CIA used with, you shame and embarrass people. They're doing it all the time, the medical industry.
Right.
Whatever that was that happened to us in the last several years,
right,
where you couldn't talk about things that were like legal, prescribed. Everybody's like, you can't say that. Take him off. Deplatform. Silence. However that stuff happened. And
to combine the two, you would have alleged nighttime comedy shows. I think both Kimmel and Stephen Colbert had dancing, singing syringes, or dancing, singing, microbes, right? And they were propagandists. They were telling you to make sure you get your shots or else don't show up in our studio. Stephen Colbert's show, even to this day, you've got to be vaxxed and prove it, and you have to wear your mask to sit in his stupid little audience and to laugh at his non-jokes. So, yeah, that's where we've come. But what happens, and each time they do something, they do it to push the envelope, to find a new level of transgression that had not been crossed before. So Sam Smith does this thing. It's disgusting. I mean, it's aesthetically grotesque. He's a grotesque-looking guy, which goes along with the ads we saw at the Super Bowl where you have, 300-pound black ladies in pink tights doing splits,
You go, girl.
Drinking Gatorade,
Yeah.
But where do you go next? Where's the next transgression? What do you have to do so that you are no longer seen as being a reactionary, someone going backwards? You've got to go forwards. Where's the next step in this evolution,
Well, you can watch it as it happens in real time, because as soon as they start using those terms, those Orwellian terms, to refer to people who have stated something that is the least bit contradictory, they'll immediately come up with words that people normally don't use, and they'll say, "Oh, you're a denier,"
right,
or "You're a truther," or whatever it is. You can see it as they oh, we've got one. They fell into this trap.
Right, that's right. That's what they do. But there can be possibly a counter-revolution. I mean, you can reach a point where a counter-revolution becomes inevitable, almost welcome, by the people whose previous transgressions have now been surpassed.
And that's what we were talking about in one of our prior episodes about how the media will jump the shark to the point where it actually is getting exposed.
Yeah. So, but I would say as a sign of a counter-revolution, you have people like Michael Bublé. Do you know him? Mm-hmm. Another Canadian, part of the Canadian plot, although Purdue star basketball player is Canadian, so what can I say? Who has created croonerism, basically. Hugely successful.
You know, Rod Stewart did that too.
Yeah. And a lot of them started. I mean, Bob Dylan is singing vintage albums. You know, Willie Nelson probably started that. I mean, the Starlight. I mean, his album, that was his best-selling album ever.
Really?
Stardust, rather.
Uh-huh.
And so there's a rediscovery of the American songbook.
Mm-hmm.
And which I think is encouraging because there's so much good material that was created and that for a new generation hasn't heard before. And I think that so many people, and when I watched the Super Bowl, to sit in the Super Bowl, you're paying, what, at least $1,000 a ticket probably for the nosebleeds, maybe more,
No
right?
idea.
A lot. You're not
sure it is.
You're not the hoi polloi. You're not the guy off the street. You're not the, you know, they didn't have to round up people at the street corners and put them in those seats to make it look full, as they did with the first Super Bowl, which was invented by Omar Hunt from Kansas City. They're making believe they're liking what's going on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they have to make believe that they like what they're seeing.
That wasn't happening at the cigar place where I was when that commercial with that 300-pound lady came on.
Right.
Nobody in that room pretended like they liked what they were seeing.
How did they react?
Mockingly, eye-rolling, fake sexual excitement, looks of a stomach ache.
Yeah.
All kinds of reaction. It was just like, but this is a humiliation exercise because when you think about it, even the most cynical ad people sitting around in a room wouldn't go, you know what? This is a heavy male viewership.
Right.
Let's run this thing
On Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
And what are we selling? Gatorade. Now, Gatorade is supposed to make you fit and healthy, right? And the larger message is that, you know, it's like love is love. One body is one body. You know, we're all, of course, it puts you at being overweight is normally you're at a higher risk for heart attacks and cancer, but you were at a dramatically higher risk of COVID death by being, as this woman is 100 pounds overweight. Not only is she 100 pounds overweight, but she's doing all these like sort of like grotesque looking splits and stuff.
Oh,
you know,
it's disgusting.
And you're right. We talked about this before, but who are they appealing to?
Well, they want to silence all those eye rolls and all those. It's like if you're sitting in a room with women, you have to just sit there and take it.
That's right.
And pretend like it's man to man have a Roy Tan, because it's not. It's now extremely obese ladies in leotards doing the splits for you.
Right. And if you're an ESPN announcer and you're sitting there watching some hideous WNBA game, you've got to make believe that this is really great and you really like it. And it's terrible.
They're earning their money.
Right. But if you're a fan at the Super Bowl and you're paying several $1,000s a seat, and you have your little the lighter on from your cell phone, like all the thousands of people did, you're almost forced to make believe you're enjoying this whole spectacle.
Oh yeah,
that you wouldn't be much rather out getting a beer someplace, and you know. Although the one person who did not make believe she enjoyed what was going on in the Super Bowl during the Black National Anthem was Carrie Lake, right? The actually should have been governor of Arizona.
What'd she do?
They catch her picture of sitting there. Oh, Christ. I was sort of pleased by that.
Black National Anthem. What an overt shot across the bow that one is.
Yes, and yet the NFL went out of its way after that was over, and I missed that, fortunately, to have this incredible patriotic spectacle from there on in, which included singing of both God Bless America, America the Beautiful, rather, and the Star Spangled Banner, which was done very well by country western singer, is it Kenny Stapleton? I forget. And then Fly Over, and then independently, without prompting, Patrick Mahomes, the winning quarterback from Kansas City Chiefs, and Jalen Hurts, the Philadelphia Eagles quarterback, did a Tim Tebow, which is they got down independent of each other. Got down on one knee and prayed just before the game, right? Conspicuously prayed. And that one unmentioned.
Of course.
But it was not unseen. Now, when Tim Tebow did that, 10 or so years ago, he was roundly criticized for doing that. So there are countercultural movements afoot.
Yeah.
And that's why we cannot be too discouraged. And that's why it pays to listen to the show here on Upstream with Cashill and Edge and at the Real Media Studios here in Overland Park, Kansas. Great multi-purpose facility.
Absolutely. I always record my podcasts here.
Yeah, right. I'm going to say this on air because I need my anxiety soothed. Carly, I forgot to push the record button. Are we recording? Okay, good. I know they can turn it on in the booth. I'm looking at it here. It's unpushed. It's unread. I said, oh, gosh. Halfway through the show, I'm thinking, all this brilliance would have been lost, to history,
Bring them up.
No, so I look for signs of the countercultural restoration. And I think the advantage that kids have today that we did not have. So when I was coming of age in 50s, 60s, et cetera, the only music we had was the music of the moment. The phrase oldies had not yet been invented, right? To me, Frank Sinatra was a friggin' dinosaur that my mother listened to. Bing Crosby, Rudy Vallée. It's all old, all musty, all useless, all pointless. To me, all that mattered was the top 40. I would watch the Dick Clark show, which was on Saturday night, as opposed to American Bandstand, breathlessly hoping that it's like I watch the AP poll for basketball now, hoping my guy is at number one on the spot, He would do the top 10 and it would count down and everyone would get excited. But that was all the music there was. So when American Graffiti was made, I believe in 1972, it was the first movie to really use a rock and roll soundtrack from a decade previously. And to introduce really the concept of oldies into movies. So now kids growing up today, can name the Beatles. Now, for my 9-year-old granddaughter, is to the Beatles what, let's see, let me try to get the math right on this. So in other words, she's 9 today. The Beatles broke up almost 50 years before she was born. About 40 years before, 45 years. So that would have been for me talking about George M. Cohan or something.
Sheet music.
Yeah, right. Before they had the microphone, before they had a Victrola, right?
Right.
Yeah, you're right. Talking, pianos with
that was
sheet
some
music.
hot sheet music. Yeah.
My gal
Did you
Sal.
see the illustration on that?
Right.
That gal Sal was showing ankle on that one.
That would have been the equivalent. And but it didn't exist for us because it wasn't available, wasn't circulating. We had no oldies of any sort. Our TV was whatever the TV was, There weren't reruns, right? We had nothing to rerun. So there is, in a sense, the seeds of restoration are always possible. And I think it would take a point of revulsion where even people like, right now, the people who are the champions of, progress or whatever, see how unpalatable, how unaesthetic, how unappealing their progeny are, what they've created and what they're putting out there. And I think people like Sam Smith and the fat lady in the Gatorade commercial are leading the way. But I could be wrong.
Well, you talked about the prayer on the field.
Right.
And how Patrick and that other guy, it was not objected or mocked or ridiculed like it was with Tebow. But remember, the guy dying on the field made it cool to pray again.
That's exactly right.
Just a couple months ago or a month and a half ago when that happened.
Right. Damar Hamlin, who fortunately has recovered, but
died twice, I think.
Yeah, right. Suffered like major cardiac arrest right on the field for reasons he even can't talk about, which is odd, but it's odd. It's typical. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You're not allowed to talk about stuff, but at the same time, it did.
So little things happen and they build up. But I agree, there has to be something compelling that move writ large toward that reestablishment of a norm.
Right.
And so as these events happen, everything chips away at that now debunked, discredited, we hope, nihilistic, eugenics sort of moral relativism, secular humanism ideal that everything was running toward when they were mocking, what's his name for praying?
Tim Tebow.
Yeah.
Right. Now, and what has to happen for a cultural restoration is for key people to wake up, to have their eyes open. Josh Allen, the quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, confessed to having a spiritual awakening after the Damar Hamlin incident. And in a place like Kansas City, when Patrick Mahomes kneels down to pray before a game, no one will criticize that. That will affect people, certainly in Kansas City.
Yep.
When Elon Musk buys Twitter, I mean, that was major. Now, this is the guy who gave them Tesla, right? This is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
They thought, when Bill Maher, the most effective anti-woke spokesman in America, does his bits, which he does on a, almost a weekly basis. And the audience says, yeah, we agree. They're sheep waiting to be led. And they just need a good shepherd.
They want somebody to fill that magical thinking hole, and they're just out there waiting for it.
Ideally, they need the good shepherd. But
that's right.
And that day may come, and it may come in increments. And we cannot get so lost in our own jadedness that we don't appreciate those moments we see where the worm is turning.
I think we get very excited about it. We're so hopeful when we see that.
But we can't get premature about our excitement. We can't.
Well, they'll turn back the other way.
Right. I mean, it's easy to be disappointed, but you see signs. I mean, you see people who are, I just recently read Naomi Wolf's book, The Bodies of Others, and what's fascinating about her is that she was a big Dem strategist and attractive lady and wrote The Beauty Myth and was part of what she calls her tribe, the liberal elite New York tribe. And then in the book, which she just, when the COVID hits, and first she's just like everyone else, runs for cover, duck and cover. She, studies her way out of that mania. And then she comes to see how barbaric is the treatment from her people to people who aren't their people, including her now, right? Friendships lost, relationships shattered, all because they have turned against the major orthodoxy of the day. And in music, I think we're ready for a restoration. And I just don't know.
I believe I heard somebody, and I was driving. I don't have that latest tech to find out who that was, but it was that station out of Warrensburg, the public station. They play a lot of new music.
Uh-huh.
And some band was actually creating new music that sounded like it was American Songbook with the same swing influences and the emphasis on lyricism.
Right.
And the orchestration was big.
Yes.
And somebody's out there doing that. And,
Right.
that's it fits and starts every now and then. You get these nostalgic things where people, but they wind up being novelty songs.
Right, that's right. And they don't
But
go
this one
anyplace.
is going for a style.
Right.
It's going for a level of sophistication.
Yeah, and that's
that was cool to hear that.
And that's what Michael Bublé does. And there's just a few elements in those songs which make them memorable. I mean, Rihanna's song Umbrella will not be sung by anyone 5 or 10 years from now. It won't be covered. The most covered song I think in history, certainly in the Beatles repertoire, is Yesterday, which is a really impressively effective little song, It's especially written by a guy who's like 23 years old or whatever he is at the time. They were surprisingly good songwriters. And, the elements of it that matter, melody. I mean, you have to have something that's likable. And then the lyrics, the quality of the lyrics. And then the believability of the singer who's singing them, right? So this gets back to the whole singer-songwriter phenomena. For one individual to be able to do the melody at top level and to do the lyrics at top level and to sing at that level is extremely rare.
Give me a few of the ones you've appreciated.
Who think can do that? To a certain degree, John Denver.
John Denver, Cat Stevens,
Yeah. Simon and Garfunkel.
Harry Chapin.
Right? Although he had a relatively short-lived career. And I saw him in person once, though.
He talked about it often.
I can imagine he did. And it was one of those places where it was a very kind of informal thing. You had to sit on the floor, and it was like a few hundred people. This was when in graduate school. Don McLean.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not many of them have a long, sustained career. And I can't even say Bob Dylan because he really couldn't sing. He had a, effective style that was likable in a way. But no, I mean, he didn't master all three of those arts, and if you could find three people to collaborate on doing it and with one person to deliver it the way it ought to be delivered.
Elton John.
Yeah, why not?
Elton John was probably the biggest thing in that genre.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah. But it's an elusive thing. There's a lot of people who do not do one of those things well and yet persist in doing them. And so I would include in that category Bruce Springsteen, whose lyrics are pretty banal and empty when you look at them,
I don't know anything about him.
But
leaves me cold.
Yeah, me too. And he's also a fake lefty. And he's faking as one of blue-collar New Jersey guy. I'm sorry, he never was. The whole thing's a fraud,
Yeah, it's that whole John Cougar.
Mellencamp, right?
Mellencamp.
Yeah, right. The fake blue-collar, right?
Fogerty.
Yeah, right.
All those guys.
Yeah. Be what you are. I mean, if you're just some, suburbanite, guy who goes to the village when you're 18 and becomes a hippie, be that person. Don't be the fake New Jersey hard guy,
I got to make a note of that because I got to figure out which one I'm going to be.
What element of fakery are you going to aim at, Well, see, I was spared all this by having no musical gifts whatsoever. So I can never impose myself on the world as a singer-songwriter. I have, however, written, I was involved in an Emmy-winning song. I did because when I did documentaries, I would start with the music. And I worked with one excellent guy who died very recently, Denny Osborne. I don't know if you knew Denny, but
No.
who was, I could say, for instance, we did these documentaries for the Holocaust Center. Denny, I need some Jewish music. And next thing you know, we have this brilliant conversation. You could sit down and do it. Or we did a thing in Rome.
I got a klezmer in my closet.
Yeah. How about some Italian music? The perfect Italian music, But I did a series for KCPT, which is the PBS station in Kansas City on Kansas City history. And at first they wanted to emulate a series that came out of Boston on famous buildings. And in Boston it was a big hit because they used it as a fundraiser, the PBS things. And so I said to him, I just lived in France recently. I had a pissoir on my block older than the oldest building in Kansas City. We don't have the raw material to make a thing on buildings. So I said, let's put people in the buildings. Let's talk about buildings with people in them and find stories to tell, because people want to really hear stories about people. They don't want to hear stories about buildings. And so they were very reluctant to give me the green light on this project. So I went out and I said, I'm going to create the music for this first. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to play this music for you, including one with a song whose lyrics I wrote. It's called Remember Me, KC. And I totally convinced them just off the music. And then I was able to edit the whole video to the music. So I had what I wanted. But I believe in the power of music. I believe in my own taste, but I believe in my own taste well enough to never want to. I won't even sing a note on the air for fear of my singing a note on the air is like that lady in the pink tights in the Gatorade ad. It has the same kind of aesthetic appeal. So I'll refrain from doing that.
That just shows what a good stand-up guy you are. You're just saving everybody from that mutual embarrassment.
Exactly. I have a certain sense of self-awareness that is, I think, useful in this business, you know.
Well, let's talk about that for another hour.
Well, we'll do that next time we do this. We'll do it on self. Or actually, that wouldn't be a bad theme. Self-awareness or the lack thereof.
Well, we've got a lot of material on that.
Yeah. It would be hard to know.
It'd be hard to beat how well we could do that. We may be the best at that in the universe.
Perhaps.
Maybe who have ever lived.
Even if there is life on other planets, you know, which gets back
their ass.
Which gets back to that ultimate paradox rather of why are we excited and when we find a bacteria on Mars to call it life, and yet you can have a 9-month-old baby living in a mother's womb and it's something other than life, you know?
Why is that?
How's that for a sobering note to end on here? So
we going away now?
Yeah, we are. We're going to sign off.
We're coming back next week?
Yes, we are back to Real Media Studios here in
Overland Park, Kansas.
Lovely Overland Park, Kansas. Actually, it's a great place. These guys are so good to us, and their facilities are so great. I would, especially other people want to do podcasts, you know, come on in. And
this is a great place to do it. They're
right.
great to work with.
And, you know, they could aspire to be the second best podcasters in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. I mean, the first place is taken. I mean, that's a given, but they could be second place. So call the guys here at Real Media Studios and get to work. Carly, thanks a lot. Loy, excellent job as always.
Thank you, Jack. You too.
And we'll be back next week with Upstream with Cashill and Edge.
Bye.